Hello everybody, this is Camilla again, and let's continue with our instructional video on how to use the Subtitle edit software so that you can get started with your translations. Now, this will just be the bare basics, but at least it will get you started. And there will be more videos in the future, so keep yourselves posted on the Translation Aids channel. Just keep ducking in and seeing if there are any new videos that are given in the future. Now, after we have loaded our SRT files, which are text files, and our video files, which will most likely be in the MP4 format, those instructions on how to do that have already been given you either in person or they have been emailed to you before. So I encourage you to look at those instructions. I won't bring it up here in this instructional video for privacy purposes because I don't want everyone online to know where that website is. Okay, so after you've loaded it, we will open a text file. I'll show you what someone else's looks like, just so that you have an idea. Let's go to Gershon. Oh, sorry. That wasn't mine, but I haven't looked at these before. Okay, here we go. Here's one. And this is what it looks like when it's already translated. Obviously, I haven't loaded the video, but I just want to show you what it looks like. You can even click on these icons to get rid of them. And that's, a lot of people like to work this way first. Let's pretend, for instance, that all this text is in Finnish. That means when you are translating your work into Swedish, you can just basically delete these lines here and start typing. And then you move on to the next line and you delete it. And notice how I highlighted it and I deleted it, but look at that. There's still some text left even though there's nothing here. That's because it's hiding. So you click on that and either drag your mouse button up or down. And in my case, I needed to click on it and drag my mouse down in order to reveal the rest of this text. Then you basically drag your cursor or your mouse over it and hit delete. Or you can use the backspace button. It doesn't matter either way. And then you type your text in there, and you do that. So this is actually a very good translated text. Why? It's because look at this. There's hardly any red areas. So this person has timed their work very well, and it's given the person reading the translated text enough time to read the translation. That's why it's good to make sure you have as little red areas as possible. The red areas represent that the text has either exceeded the recommended duration or it has gone below the recommended minimum duration. Or sometimes, for example, when there's only one word, if it was read here, it means that it may have been too little time to read that, because the minimum duration time which is set in the software is set to 3 seconds and the maximum duration time is 6 seconds. But there are always times when you do need to make compromises, when you do need to give maybe fractionally less time or fractionally more time. Okay, I'm not going to save this because I don't want to overwrite the file. So I'll go to File, New. Do you want to save changes? No, I don't. Otherwise I'll be overwriting it. Now, let's load one that I will be working on. So I'll go to Open. I know where I've saved it. And see this, the SRT file. Subtitle edit software works with the SRT files. At least they're the ones that we will be working with when we're doing translation work. I'll click on that and load it. Open. And now I want to load the video file. Oh, sorry. Just testing you there. We go to video. Open video file. I'm only kidding. Jerusalem Studio 41. See, when you bring your mouse cursor over, can you see it says MP4, VLC media file? I hope you've installed your VLC. Now I'll click stop. Now I actually have loaded this video before, but when you have loaded or are loading your video for the very first time, and as long as you have this waveform area selected, in other words, as long as it's appearing, your grid will be totally black, okay, apart from the grid. But in the center here, it will say click to add waveform. I have loaded mine already, which is why I've got this green, very, very pale green squiggly line, which represents the audio, any type of audio, any type of sound. It could be background noise, it could be music, it could be a person talking, it could be several people talking. In whatever case, it's representing volume and sound. Now, so when you click on the waveform, a little box will appear in the center, and you will notice that it will start loading. And depending on how long the film is, it might take, for instance, 1 minute, maybe more or less. So now I've loaded this. We will pretend that here I have got this in finish, because I just want to show you again, just go through it again on how to change the text. I don't want to delete the whole line. See, if I highlight the line here and press delete, 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 okay, I've lost all the timing. That's not going to help you. So just to reverse something that was done, you go to edit and you can click on undo. But before we do that, look at what the hotkey is, the shortcut, Control plus Z. And that's exactly what I will do. Control Z, 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 Z. How many lines were there? Okay, I did it too many times. It took me over into the previous field, but that's okay. Control new, I don't want to save it. Well, this is good for you to know, because I'm sure that you are going to go through the same things. I just happen to know what happened. But if you're very new, you might not know. So this doesn't worry me. Okay. Right. Now, so instead of hitting delete and deleting the whole lines, we will delete the content. See how the text still remains? What do we need to do? We need to click on the box in there and either drag the mouse up or drag the mouse down. When I drag it down, I can see the rest of the text. That's when you highlight it, and you can click backspace or the delete button. And we just keep doing that. Look, the text is still there. So drag it up or down, backspace, it's still there. I wonder what happens when I do that. Okay. Now, I'm only doing that because I'm pretending it was in Finnish, which it wasn't. It was in Swedish. And okay, here I'm going to explain that the relatively flat areas is when there's hardly no sound that can be heard. I happen to know it's music here. So as we go along, when someone starts talking, it's going to be very jagged or very squiggly like this. And when they're pausing in their speech, it'll probably look something like that. And that's really handy for us to know, because then we know, we can extend our translated text a little bit into when they are pausing in order to give the person at home more time to read your translated text. Okay, let's go. And the very first thing we need to do when we are translating a film is to translate the title. So please don't forget to do that. Okay, I had it easy because I've already got the timing set here. If you don't have the timing, I'm going to go through that later on when I start doing a new line, entering a new text line. And before I translate this title, I just want to show you how to navigate here. This waveform is a timeline. It's both a timeline visually and audibly. Now let's see this gauge, the sliding gauge underneath this waveform? That can fast forward you through the entire film if you drag it all the way to the end, and it can even rewind. And what I have done is I've clicked on this little tab with a left mouse button click, and keeping it depressed, I have dragged it like that. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. You can also do a single left mouse button click on the timeline this way. And as you can see, the monitor screen has changed accordingly. And another way that we can move or navigate in through the timeline is, see these arrows here? There's two rows. There's an upper row and a lower row. And in the upper row, the arrows that are pointing to the left, they go backwards in small steps. See that? And you can't keep it depressed. It's only going to move back once every single time you just do a single click. And the other button, naturally, that points the opposite direction, points to the right, is just going to take small steps forward. And the one on the bottom row, it does the same thing, but instead of taking small steps, it takes longer steps. So, look at this. Okay, it's probably roughly worth 3 of the small steps, I think. And I'm going backwards. Now, see this light blue line? This light blue line travels when the video is playing. And this is where you need to keep your eyes peeled for when you want to pause the video in an exact location where you want to insert or edit text. But let's get started, and I'm going to translate that first step, the first title. Now I'm going to go forward. See this red area? Okay, it's a grayed out background, slightly grayed out background with a red text, which means that is the one that has been selected. It's dependent upon which line I have highlighted here. See, when I have another line highlighted, this isn't red anymore. That's why if I go to this position where the light blue line is, if I select the correct line, it's going to go red. Now, in order for me to translate this title into Swedish, I click here in the text field. This is the text field here where I enter text. Now, Art Studio Jerusalem, like that. And look, it's appeared down the bottom of the screen, which is exactly where we want it. And the timing I don't need to do because look, it's already been done for me. And let's continue playing this. And I'll just give you another example. I happen to know that this is music, and you've already heard some of it. But see how the music, the squiggly line, is diminishing. It's getting smaller and smaller. That means the music is fading out. In other words, it's getting softer and softer. And then all of a sudden, if you look carefully here, the squiggly line gets really jagged again. I happen to know, because I have seen the video before, this is when Jonathan starts talking. And the grayed out area, what is that? Well, that's simply the timing of the next line. It's the work of the previous translator who has entered the timing for you. We won't always have that, but it's good for you to know so that you know how to work with it. Now, if I double click on this line here, the first line, this video, this blue line is going to go back to the time when I've translated this text, and it's going to continue playing the video until I stop or pause it. I recommend to pause the video and don't stop it, because if you stop it like that, in fact I will do it now. If I stop it, you watch what happens. The needle goes all the way back to the beginning of the video. And then when I press play, look, it's going to start from the beginning. But in order to refrain from doing that, I can just double click here, Studio Jerusalem, and it plays it. Look, there's the text. Just look if the timing is correct. Okay, my text was on a little bit longer. In this case, I don't really need to be that fussy, but I do want to make it as accurate as possible because I am trying to teach you. Now what we do is we move the cursor to the very edge of that translated text. Can you see how my cursor has changed into 2 arrows? Now with the left mouse click, I click on that, keep the mouse button down, and I drag it a little bit backwards. Okay, I just did it. I didn't move it much, just fractionally. Now let's see if it's okay. All right. I'll do it again. Let's play it. Okay, that's good enough. But I'm just wanting to show you how to do that. And let's get ready for the next line to translate.
Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio.
Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Now make sure that you're putting the text on the correct line. Make sure the line isn't highlighted down there. We go to the next available time slot and let's enter the text in Swedish. Shalom och välkomna till Studio Jerusalem. Okay. Now see how this is all red? In this particular case, I know it's because I haven't divided the line into 2 rows. Sometimes the text can either be too much. If I'm putting too much text here, see how it goes yellow? It's giving me warnings. In fact, if I do it far too much, see how it even goes red on the bottom there, total length? I have exceeded the recommended amount of text. And in actual fact, even though you can physically enter text that long, it's not going to work for the reader, and there is a very big risk that your text will not even be shown completely on the TV screen. So I'll delete that. I don't need it. And here, look at the text here. It's all in one row. If I click on auto break, look what happens. See? It's divided that single row and made it into 2. And that's good. Let's continue. Now this is red, but I have to compromise in these particular cases because I don't have a lot of time to give the reader to read that. However, the good news is that there isn't a lot of text here for the reader to read. If you want to compromise, you can fractionally extend this translated text, the time of it, extend it more, and you do a left mouse button click and you can extend it. Look what happens on row 2 up there. See where it says here 2.624. Look what happens when I extend it down here. Can you see how the figures change and it's turned blue? Unfortunately, that's too long because Jonathan hasn't even started to talk and I've got the translated text on the screen. You can make small compromises and maybe enter the text just 1 fraction of a second before he starts talking. Now let's play that. I'll double click here on the first line. Remember, that's where we can play the video from that position. So double click.
Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Ever since the Israeli-Egyptian peace agreement was signed in 1979...
Okay, I'll pause it there. I'm going to translate his next line. Okay, if the line is down there, make sure you have it on the correct line. We click inside the text box and we will translate his text. Please make sure to read the directions. Hang on, I'm talking at the same time as I'm typing. I just want to concentrate a little better. Otherwise I'll be writing in Swinglish. Okay, now I know he hasn't finished his sentence, so I'll do a space and a dash, because that's the Swedish writing rules. Okay, that's not so for English, but in Swedish it is. And since we're translating into Swedish, we have to stick to the Swedish writing rules. If it's the end of a sentence, then naturally, please don't forget to do your full stops. But he hasn't finished the sentence, so we do that. And see how it's all red now. This reminds us, hang on, what's wrong? Okay, we'll click here. Oh, it's one single long line. Let's break the text. There we go. It's divided into 2 rows, and this is turned blue, which is a good sign. Let's continue. And just for context, I will double click on the line above it so that we can hear it in correct context.
Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Ever since the Israeli-Egyptian peace agreement was signed in 1979, the Sinai Peninsula has been a demilitarized zone to allow for a long response.
The Sinai Peninsula has been a demilitarized zone. Okay, look at that. Can you see how the line has skipped the empty one? That's because I took too long to pause the video and the needle has gone over into the next time frame. So make sure you're on the correct time frame. Another way to know is this is red, so we know that's active. So if I type here, see, it's going to type, see how it's got FXG like my silly typing there. So I know I'm in the wrong area. Another way, as I've said earlier, is it has to be highlighted. And look at that. Now that I've selected the correct one, this is red. Another way to see up here, it's actually given me a brief summary of what I have typed in the previous time slots. Here it says ända sedan fredsavtalet mellan Israel och Egypten. And so that's good. It's another way. So click in this text field and let's enter. Now what did he say? That's right. Hard. Okay, he hasn't finished his sentence, so I'm doing a space and a dash. Just always check your text, because even though you can spell, we can make accidental typing errors, or we have wrong capitals, or we've got lowercase where it shouldn't be lowercase, etc. And this seems to be fine. Demilitariserad. See, even I got it wrong. Demilitariserad. See? Okay, this is one long line, and see it's red there. It's alerting us that something needs to be done. And in this case, it's an auto break. There we go. There's another thing I'll need to mention here. Sometimes when we divide the text, the upper row is a lot longer than the lower row. And according to the instructions we gave, we need, as a general rule of thumb, we need the upper row to be shorter and the lower row to be longer in length, only because this translated text will actually be on the video screen later on. It isn't now when we are working with it, but it will be later when it's given to us and we put it through the system. And the reason for that, for the upper row to be shorter and the lower row to be longer, is so that it provides the video screen to be seen. Depending on what is shown on the video screen, we could be blocking some important visual aspect, which we don't want to do. So just for habit's sake, even though this is a news break, we still will stick to those parameters, those rules. Now let's continue, and for context purposes, let's double click on the line above it.
Ever since the Israeli-Egyptian peace agreement was signed in 1979, the Sinai Peninsula has been a demilitarized zone to allow for a long response time in the case of a possible Egyptian attack on Israel.
Wow, okay. One thing I did notice, let's use these little baby steps backwards. Remember I showed you that? Look at that. Can you see that this line here and the next line there, can you see the grayed out areas? Two different grayed out areas are touching each other. There's no small little sliver of black space. See over here we've got a darker area, a black sliver of black space. Well, the reason which it makes it really good to have a very small area there is because it creates a contrast for the reader, because when the reader reads, most people read that and then they'll look up, and then if you have a small black space, what will happen is this text will disappear for a fraction of a second, and then all of a sudden your new text will appear in, you know, a couple of seconds, or not even that, a fraction of a second time. And that helps the reader. It gives them a visual cue of when to read the new text. So that's why these things are good. Just give it a small space of time there. Now I need to remember what he said.
Militarized zone to allow for a long response time in the case of a possible Egyptian attack on Israel.
Okay, now let's go back. And I know it's this one. There. Okay, he did say eventual military attack on Israel. The only thing is if I put for Israel like that, I've got a feeling the text is going to be, yes it is. See how it's turned yellow? It's telling me it's too much text. Sometimes we will allow it to go yellow as long as it fits on the screen. And how do we know it fits on the screen? Okay, no, it's not going to let me. It's still red, which isn't good. Even though it fits on the screen for us, and now, in the way we see it, it's not going to fit on the screen later when we edit the text. Because remember, this text is going to be a little bit bigger, and it's even going to shift up on the screen here. So I need to edit that. I'm going to take away for Israel, do a full stop there, and press auto break again. Did you notice how it changed? And look at that, 5 seconds. That's a good timing there. I know when he said Israel, see, I've given them more time. What I did was I did a left mouse button click. Now I'll over-exaggerate. See when the cursor changes into 2 arrows and I click down and keeping the button pressed, it changes the time up here. See on the row 5, duration, it says 4.406 at the moment. See that? And now, by dragging this, I'm extending the time. Okay. Can you see here that the line is relatively straight in comparison with the rest? This is when Jonathan takes a pause in his speech. So then I know that I can drag this timing all the way until he starts to take a breath. And then with the next text, if he's saying a lot, I prefer to start the new text while he is taking his breath, because remember, it's only a fraction of a second, but it does help the reader out there and give them more time to read the new text. Now, for context, we will double-click on the line above so that the video plays it from that position.
The Sinai Peninsula has been a demilitarized zone to allow for a long response time in the case of a possible Egyptian attack on Israel. The civilian uprising in Tahrir Square in the summer of 2010.
Okay, the summer uprising. Let's go backwards. Take a long step here. Okay, you don't always have to have this blue line in the position where you're translating, but I prefer to have it that way just for habit, and also to teach you good habits from the start, because then you will actively see your text appear here at the same time as you're typing, and that's a good thing. Now, what did he say? Okay, now it's all red. What does that mean? I need to break the text. So we'll click on auto break. There we go. It's divided into two lines. And even though the upper line is slightly longer, I can actually do it like this. Get rid of that dash. I did a backspace. I press here, sorry, behind the correct word I can do it. Now, okay, now I've made it into a single line again. I think what I'll do is I'll put a dash between Tahrir Platzen. I'll divide the word into two. And now I'll do auto break. Okay, that didn't work. So I'm going to go in front of the word Platzen, press enter. Look what it's done on the screen. So I'll go space after Platzen and then delete. There we go. Now I have the lower row longer. And that looks a lot better too. Okay. Now let's continue. This next one I'll show you how to insert a new line. Look, I've run out of timed text, timed lines. And you can do a right click on the text field. See, when I do a right click, see it's given me an option, insert line. Click on that. There we go. So they are ways of doing it. However, there's another way. On existing lines, see, if I click here, it's only going to say insert line. But if I click up here where these lines exist, do a right click, look at that. It's given me a much longer menu to choose from. And then you can press insert before, insert after, delete, insert subtitle after this line, etc., etc. Copy as text to clipboard, and so on. Bold, italic. Now, italic means kursiv in Swedish, but I don't want that because I want to show you how to do it another way. And so let's play from here. And then I'm going to get ready to click my finger on the pause button so that I can insert a new line a different way.
To allow for a long response time in the case of a possible Egyptian attack on Israel. The civilian uprising in Tahrir Square in the summer of 2010, which led to the downfall of President Mubarak's regime and
Okay. Now, see here, where my mouse is, it says insert new subtitle at video position. That's exactly what I want to do, even though now Jonathan has had time to say what he has said. So even though I'm clicking this button and it's appearing in the wrong area, it doesn't matter. I'll do first things first, and I will just first translate what he said, and then we will move the position into the correct area. What did he say? Okay, I'll just double check if I've written that correctly. Vilken ledde till president Mubaraks och regimens fall? Okay. By the way, there is a shortcut in order to insert new subtitles. And see right next to that button it says F9. If you press F9, which is known as a hotkey or a shortcut, the same thing will happen. You will get a new line to edit on. I can't press that button because otherwise I will unfortunately be stopping the recording of this video. But otherwise you can do so. Please get used to learning the shortcuts because it really will compress your working time eventually. So in the beginning it might not, but in the end it will. And they're really good to work with. The people who work with translations a lot always use shortcuts. It makes it so much faster. Okay, let's go backwards because remember, I placed this text in the wrong area. Now, see where my last translation happened? You can even see the text up here, Platsen under sommaren 2010. If I do a left click on the timeline, and actually if I click on the one ahead, we can see that this text, see the jagged line? See how it all of a sudden gets relatively flat? Jonathan is taking a breath there. So I'll do a left click on the new subtitle and I'll drag it. Look at that. Very good. So I'll drag it up. In actual fact, even though he's starting to talk here in that area, see where my mouse is? Even though he's starting to talk there, I will drag it up even more because he's saying quite a lot here and I want to give the reader more time to read the text. And I don't want it going into his new line. So I just be really careful when you do this. Okay, and unfortunately it's at even though it's at 3.797 seconds, it's below the recommended time for the reader to be able to read your text comfortably. But I'm forced to do that. Look, I'm even taking the pause periods here in order for my text to show. So there's nothing else I can do. That's when you know that you just have to, bend the rules for that particular line. Now this is red here, so I need to do an auto break on the text. So I did a left click so I can see the video position. There's my line. Click auto break, and there we go. And now I'll show you how to save it. We go to File, Save As, and this by default, which means förinställd, this is the name of the file. Please do not ever change the name. Don't ever make it give any capitals even though there's a name involved here. Don't remove any letters, don't put any dots or dashes or any type of characters. However, what we must do is add to the end of the file name. Because we are translating into Swedish, we need to write a dash and SE, and then we click Save. And then it's automatically going to ask you if you want to write over or if you want to replace the file. And yes, I do, because if I click No and close the program, you have lost all your work. You don't want to do that. So do you want to replace it? Yes. There we go. I hope this has been very helpful, and keep your eyes peeled on the Translation Aids channel for future instructional videos. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.